The thing about Stormy Daniels, her testimony is utterly irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
We're into the final hours of the Trump hush money trial in New York, with closing arguments currently underway. The former president and presumptive Republican nominee faces accusations that he falsified business records to cover up an alleged sexual relationship with Stormy Daniels. The trial has dominated headlines in the United States and around the world and has become a defining image of the early stages of the 2024 presidential election. Let's speak to a former lawyer for Donald Trump, Alan Dershowitz, now, who joins us on the show. Good evening to you.
Good evening. I am a former lawyer for Donald Trump, but not a political supporter. I'm a liberal Democrat.
Thank you for pointing that out. It is an important definition to make, and no doubt one that'll become clear in our conversation. But let's talk about the legals first of all.
Sure.
Donald Trump's lawyers summed up by giving the jurors 10 reasons why they shouldn't convict him for business fraud, and called the star witness Michael Cohen the MVP of liars. How convincing were they in what they put across?
Well, I don't think they were particularly convincing. They seem to have left out the most important part of the defense case, namely the critical missing witness. There's one conversation that's absolutely critical, a conversation that allegedly occurred with three people present: Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, and a man named Alan Weisenberg. And the prosecution didn't call Alan Weisenberg. He could have confirmed or disconfirmed the testimony of Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is a liar. We know he admitted lying many times, and according to many people, including me, he lied in front of this jury, for example, when he said he had no financial interest in the outcome of this case. Of course he does. He's trying to have a television show called The Fixer, and he's selling pictures of Donald Trump behind bars, so of course he has a financial interest. But the key point is that conversation. And the defense didn't emphasize that enough, and didn't emphasize the missing witness. There are two missing witnesses, that missing witness and the person who allegedly overheard a telephone conversation between Trump and Cohen, in which Cohen mostly talked about how a 14-year-old kid was harassing him, but claims to have also told Donald Trump about the terms of the payment. So there's a lot of gaps in the prosecution's case, and I don't think the defense did a good enough job in exposing it. But, we'll never know until the jury rules. The jury is comprised of 12 New Yorkers from Manhattan. Most of them almost certainly don't want to see Trump as president and voted against him last time. So the jury bias may become a factor in the case as well.
The prosecution, as you say, was not without its fragility. They did admit that Michael Cohen was not an ideal witness. They also admitted that parts of Stormy Daniels' testimony were cringeworthy but true. Will that wash with the jury, the fact that they are, seemingly trying to be quite open about the fragility of some of their witnesses?
No, because they also said that she and he should both be believed in their critical testimony. The thing about Stormy Daniels, her testimony is utterly irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether Trump ever had sex with her or not. The only important thing is that she tried to get money from him in exchange for not disclosing whether they had sex. It would have been the same thing if they hadn't had sex, but she had said, in fact, there was such a case. A doorman said that he had evidence that Trump had fathered somebody, and they paid him money too, even though the story was obviously untrue. So the whole testimony involving Stormy Daniels was just designed to get the attention not only of the public but of the jurors, and to show a salacious part of this case. It's utterly irrelevant, but I don't know whether the defense will focus on that or not.
The defense said today, in their summing up, that conspiracies to win elections happen all the time. It raised a few eyebrows. In other words, that trying to potentially hide money to make a candidate appear cleaner than he actually is, in terms of paying people off, etc., and then hiding the money. That is completely normal in American politics.
No,
Every
it's
campaign
not.
in this country is a conspiracy to promote a candidate, was what Trump's defense said.
No, that's an absurd argument. But the question, though, is whether or not, in this case, it really mattered whether or not Trump was or wasn't accused of having sex yet with another woman. Remember, this is after the Access Hollywood tape had come out, which certainly portrayed Trump as less than an ideal person when it came to sex, and was the only reason that the money was paid in this case was to prevent the information about a porn star affecting the election, or did Trump also not want it to affect his marriage, his business? Remember, he has a contract also at that point with a TV station, which has a morality clause in it, which could have been canceled had it come out. And if there's any reason other than trying to affect an election, then there must be an acquittal in the case. So, the evidence seems just to be underwhelming of his guilt, and he never would have been prosecuted had he not been running for president. And so, a lot of liberal Democrats like me are worried we don't want to Putinize America. Putin puts his enemies in prison, and other tyrannies put their enemies in prison. The idea that my party, the Democratic Party, would try to win this election by criminalizing something that's never been prosecuted before in history. Alexander Hamilton had an affair, and he paid hush money. It's a very common thing,
Yeah.
and it's very worrisome that this becomes a central part of an election campaign.
Yeah.
The weaponization of the criminal justice system for partisan purposes is a danger on both sides. Both the Republicans and the Democrats do it.
Only a unanimous verdict can convict Trump. When are we likely to hear a verdict? And what happens if Donald Trump is found guilty?
Well, he doesn't necessarily go to prison. He might get some home arrest or a substantial fine, but he'd have a felony conviction, and there'd be some voters who would be influenced by that. Then there would be an immediate appeal, and the big question would be whether the appeal could be decided before the election or after the election, and that's going to be up to the higher courts to see how quickly they can get to the appeal itself. So, this is just, I wouldn't say the beginning, but it's the middle. It's not the end.
Yeah, and look, there are other cases against Donald Trump as well,
Sure.
and you wonder whether this will wash away in the fullness of time as people become drawn to other charges against Donald Trump. Who knows? All of this, of course, while an election campaign is ongoing. Alan Dershowitz, thanks so much for being with us. Always fascinating.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is a former lawyer, but not a supporter of Donald Trump, Alan Dershowitz, with us there.